The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
Hi, I'm Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, Susan Salcido, and I am so delighted today to introduce our guest, Mark Booher, who's the art director at the PCPA, Pacific Conservatory Theater in Santa Maria, and also has such an important job of being Associate Dean for Allen Hancock College. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It'll be a really wonderful conversation, I know, just from knowing you. I can't wait to share with our audience today your story and the impact that you bring, your leadership and the art that you bring to the community is so enormous. I can't wait to go there. But before we do, let's talk about you and your background in childhood. Tell us where you grew up, your childhood, where you went to school.
I grew up in the Bay Area of California, but I was born in Nebraska, and my parents came out to California in the early 60s for teaching jobs.
Okay.
But every summer we went back and spent 3 months on my grandparents' dairy farm. So I always feel like I grew up in part in Nebraska in the Midwest. But went to school in Fairfield, California, went to Solano Community College growing up, and then eventually got my bachelor's degree at Sacramento State University in drama, which was not necessarily something that was predicted, I think, by my family's history. Not a lot of artists or actors certainly in my family.
Right, but a lot of teachers. And I would say, in talking with you, you do a lot of teaching and through the work that you do too. So while you're an artist, director, and associate dean, I feel like there's just that core in you that's always teaching and thinking about learning as well.
There's certainly an affinity between the artistic impulse and the impulse to communicate, which is teaching, and teaching is an art, of course.
Of course.
And both of them, have a goal of transforming their audience for their good.
Well, I'd love to hear and share with the audience how you did find the theater. You talk about having grown up in farmland and having parents as teachers, but you were an athlete, I think, in school. Somehow something turned for you from athletics to the theater. What happened there?
Well, it was actually really simple. I was a pretty good football player, not a very good basketball player, even though I was a big guy. But the truth is, the thing that really drew me to the theater was what most of us are looking for, particularly in adolescence, which is acceptance. I found a group of people who seemed to see me in a way that the guys I was playing ball with didn't really. And so I went from being a starting offensive and defensive tackle on the football team, and then in my junior year I quit and joined the show choir and the dance company and started doing plays, which socially, I wasn't really prepared for what that was going to feel like at my high school, because it wasn't really a cool thing to do. But ultimately, that's where I really found my people. And I think that's the best thing that can happen to you as a young person, is where you sort of go, here's my affinity group, and I have an opportunity to kind of discover myself and build my talents.
Yeah, so finding your people, that sense of belonging, I think that's so great. So then somehow you found yourself here in Santa Maria and connected with PCPA. So from college to here, could you trace for us that path and journey?
That's funny, because there's a really direct path in that I went to graduate school at UC Irvine, got my Master of Fine Arts degree with a wonderful actor named Kitty Bailey. And we were actually classmates for 3 years there at UCI. And right after graduate school, I had the good fortune of being hired at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival as an actor. I worked there for 3 seasons. Did 11 plays for them, and that's where I started both teaching and doing some fight direction, choreographing violence for the stage, another little skill that I picked up. And then I had moved back to the Bay Area and was actually serving as interim artistic director at the California Shakespeare Festival in Berkeley and Orinda, back in the Bay, which was home for me. And I got a call from Kitty Bailey saying, there's a conservatory director job open at PCPA. Aren't you applying for it? And my dear wife, Lindy, was pregnant with our son, Jesse, at the time. And I thought, oh, a steady job in the arts on the beautiful Central Coast sounded really attractive. And so, but you know, my entire professional career up to that point had been 10 years in the professional theater. I hadn't really been, you know, distinctly in the educational side.
Right. So in a sense, you've had perfect training all along that got you right to where you are, or where you started and where you are now. And Kitty Bailey, you've mentioned, and she's such an icon in the community, and how neat to have gone to school with her at Irvine and then found your way together here.
Right, still colleagues.
Still colleagues, yeah, absolutely. So I know those of the audience who are viewing, I'm sure has heard of PCPA or attended any one of the amazing shows that you put on, but in case there's somebody who doesn't know much about PCPA, can you share about it, its history, and its place here in the community?
Well, that's a big story, of course, and I'll try and give the quick version of it. PCPA, of course, is the Pacific Conservatory Theater. Conservatory is right in our middle name because we are a professional theater company and a 2-year training program for actors and technicians. And then we also have year-round professional internships for early career theater professionals. The foundation of it, though, goes back to 1964 when Walter Conrad, who was then the superintendent president of Allen Hancock College, had a vision for starting a drama department on the college campus. And that really grew out of his commitment to have the college have a central role in the cultural life of the community, because the thing that we have to remember is in 1964 there were only just about 20,000 people living in Santa Maria. It was a very small community, and Walter Conrad felt like it was the responsibility of the college to provide culture. And so he hired Donovan Marley, who people can forget was only 26 years old when he was hired as the director of drama at Allen Hancock College. But by the summer of 1965, Donovan had gathered 23 drama students, and they put on a season of plays in a little barracks building at the old Hancock Field. And that, you know, really there has been nonstop production going since that summer season. That first production of All My Sons through today has been sort of a continuous and contiguous growth. You know, starting out in that little barracks building, of course, the Marion Theater was built in 1968, which has been our artistic home since then. The Severson Theater, a small black box, was added in 1993. And most of our friends in the community are familiar with our relationship with the Solvang Theater Fest. So every summer we take 4 plays down to the beautiful Solvang Festival Theater.
And those are the venues then? Those are
right, those 3 theaters. And occasionally we produce, you know, PCPA has toured shows with the USO, you know, back in the 80s. We've occasionally taken a show up to Arroyo Grande or down to Santa Barbara, but really home is the Marion Theater and the Solvang Festival
Love
Theater.
the history, and as part of your role, it sounds like you're part historian too. You keep track of all that has happened.
Well, you end up, I think it's true in any organization, those of you who have been with the company for a while, you end up being the torchbearer, you know, the sort of institutional memory. And so it's been, part of what's been great about my role has been getting to be with PCPA during the 50th anniversary season, just back in 2013. And so that was an opportunity to not only learn a lot myself, but to meet a lot of the people who were at PCPA in the 60s and 70s and hear their stories. And so it has sort of made me it fueled my passion.
I love it. Well, we were able to talk about that anniversary celebration in person just a few, I think, months back. But it's such a special occasion. Share with others what that sort of felt like and looked like, especially because people came back from all the years.
Well, it was amazing. And of course, PCPA has probably 10,000 alumni who have been through the training programs or been in the summer company. But in 2013, we had just a sliver of those. Only about 350 of them came back.
That's incredible.
You know, folks from across the decades, going all the way back to 1968, but basically through every decade we've been in operation. the former artistic directors, Donovan Marley was there, Laird Williamson, Jack Schaus, the real heroes of the company. And the thing that was most gratifying about it, I think, though, to me, was that the alumni returned and said, it still feels like home. There's something about the combination of aesthetic excellence and educational passion, and the synthesis of that that's really creates a kind of magic, the energy that brings. And the fact that the people who have a long history with the company said, this still feels like the PCPA I remember,
That must
of
feel
course
so
was,
good.
really gratifying.
Yeah, and many of the alum have gone on to do major things, but my understanding is they often do attribute their kind of baseline from PCPA and what they learned.
I think the professionalism, the integrity, the hard work, the skills, and really having an opportunity then to take all of the skills that you might learn in a studio and immediately apply them, to a professional level production. In front of an audience, and the audience is a big teacher about what's working and what's not working
That's
in
right.
the moment. So
In the moment.
that professional practice, really makes a huge difference for people.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you said a moment ago about the conservatory in a 2-year program. Students are in. You've had 10,000 plus alum. It sounds like at this point is what you said. But at this time in the program, in a 2-year program, how many students are part of that? And it's not just about acting. I mean, there's so much more. And I say just because with the, it's
Sure.
not at all.
Well, I think acting is the thing that people think of first because it's their first apprehension of play going.
Right.
They sit in the theater and they see the actor do their thing. Of course, you start to look around about the clothes the actors are wearing, the lighting that they're under, and the way that it's all managed, and the beautiful scenery that they're on. So we, of course, not only train actors but technicians for the theater. And so, yes, there's 2-year training for actors and 2-year training for technicians. And the technicians, there are lots of disciplines within the technical theater that people might not necessarily appreciate. So not only lighting and sound and scenery and costumes, but things like stage management, production management, things inside costumes like costume crafts. There's this discipline that makes things that people wear but aren't necessarily fabric or sewn. So things like hats or armor or shoes or belts, and so every year we accept about 32 actors into the program. This year we will have seen 600 audition for those 32 spots, and we accept 12 technicians in the program every year. So that means we have about 24 technicians at any one time and about 60 plus actors in the program. And then we usually have about 25 professional interns who are with us in all of our disciplines, from musical direction to stage management to carpentry. So in total, what we call the student company, they're all enrolled in Allen Hancock College courses that are career and technical education courses. We have usually about 100 to 105 students, and then in the summer we get bigger. We have about 120 students in the program, and then about 50 full-time staff. So right here in Santa Maria, a resident company of artists of about 150 people.
Wow, that's incredible. I want to talk about how you think through what a season might look like. Before we go there, I just want to say one thing about the Hancock College relationship with PCPA, because it is, my understanding is very unique, most unique, maybe the only kind like this in the United States, is my understanding. Can you say just what that is, and then we'll go on to that season?
No, I think that's correct. I think PCPA is the only program of its kind at a community college where you have a fully professional, kind of standalone, not-for-profit theater company that's absolutely integrated into a career and technical education program. And there really is no dividing line between us as Allen Hancock College program and as professional theater company. And that synthesis is really unique. It's not only what makes us unique and helps us function operationally, but it's also really unique as a training model to have this quality of experience for students when they're paying community college tuition is really, extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, such a gem, truly. So let's talk about a season. You know, there's been many seasons. You've been part of many of them. And you clearly have to decide and think through, how are you going to put that together? Some things I would imagine are maybe partially or all entertainment, but also impactful in other ways, pushing ideas forward. There's a huge array of thinking, I think, that goes behind that. I can't begin to describe it. Can you help describe what goes into that kind of thinking?
It's pretty complicated, and it's something that I and the rest of the leadership team at PCPA spend a lot of our time doing, is considering what the work will be. Of course, we're always doing it while we're producing a full season of plays. So we're right now planning season 55. We're sort of in the final planning stage for what will be our next season. We like to have the plays chosen about 18 months before we produce them. And so it's a relatively long planning arc. And we're basically considering three things. What's the artistic merit of the individual work of art? What is the financial cost of doing it? And what do we think it will do for us on the revenue side at the box office? And then what does it mean for us educationally? How does it contribute to the dramatic literacy of our students and the cultural literacy of our community?
Right.
And
so let me just stop for a second. Sure. So that is, so the artistic piece, the business piece, and then an educational piece.
Yes.
Those are some of the three. So those are three of the sum.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
good. And then looking at how those, the sort of three legs of that stool, how those balance one another across a season of plays. Because as you were indicated, that there might be a show where you say, this is going to be amazing at the box office. We're going to do this fantastic show. We think the community is really going to respond to it. It's going to be popular. They're going to come. And it's going to be entertaining. And I don't want to undersell the power of entertainment. If you can positively divert someone from the care and stress of their life for 2 hours, I think there are times when any of us as a person, you think, if I can lift my friend's spirit for a couple of hours, that was a good day.
Absolutely.
I think so. So I don't think of it as just entertainment. To entertain is a great thing. But there are certainly plays where we want to be more probative, maybe even provocative, that we want to inspire people to think and feel deeply, or maybe to have a pathway to something that they otherwise don't have access to, because the arts are always our bridge to an experience that we otherwise don't have an access point to. Right. And so that's the unique thing that, first a playwright and then the people who bring that play to life, one of the things that they're doing is they're giving us, they're opening a door into a world that we might otherwise not be able to enter. And I think what that does ultimately is that builds community, and it certainly, when you start to say, I don't know that I would have understood that story in such a personal, deep, nuanced, vibrant way until I saw a play that was about that. And suddenly that coworker or that acquaintance in the community or that person that I think is my adversary, I see them in a little more complicated and hopefully empathetic way. So there's that sort of mission about what art does in a community that's also part of season selection as well.
That's great. Very profound. So there's so much that goes into a season. You said you're working on season 55 now, and you're on which season now?
Season 54.
54, so you're working on the next season now, months ahead of when it'll actually happen. Yeah. And before leaving that topic too, I would assume that you think differently in terms of the location, the Solvang Theater, the Santa Maria Hancock Theater, probably because of different audiences.
Different audiences, different technical capacities that those theater spaces have, different times of year. The summer season tends to be slightly lighter fare, so there's a lot of different factors that go into season selection for sure.
That's great. Thank you for sharing all of that. Very insightful. And I want to turn now to something you just said a moment ago had to do with the arts pretty much unlocking thinking and approaching things in different ways that other things can't do, something that the arts just can really inspire. So let's turn that to children, students, kids. I know PCPA goes into the schools, you advocate for the arts in schools. Say a little bit about what it is that you do And then maybe say why you do it.
We do not only have a pretty robust student matinee program where local students come to the theaters on the Hancock campus and see plays there, but we have an outreach program where we take schools to them, which I think is really important for that they see how story can even transform their cafeteria or their library or their classroom or their gymnasium into a place of wonder. And the interesting thing is it's a big responsibility because I think a lot of young people in our community see their first play at their school through a PCPA production, and so we want it to be excellent. We want people to say, "Wow, this live theater thing is amazing," and I guess yes, because they're our future audience, but really, ultimately, it's for them. It's because all of us who are making theater now, at some point, were that kid who said, "I see something about myself, my life experience reflected in this story being told." And so one of the, sometimes it's overt and sometimes it's a little covert, but one of the messages that's always under storytelling is that you can be seen and heard, that the thing that's going on inside you, the experience that you're having in the classroom and at home, there's a word for that. There's a way, there might be a color for it. There might be a shape for it. You might find a way of expressing your unique story through an artistic medium, and we know that people they're looking for a way to connect, to be authentically recognized as themselves, to have a way of being truthful about their thoughts and emotions, and so if we can give young people a palette of expression, they're, I think, going to tend to express that in healthier ways, ways that build up connection and community and build themselves up, because all of us have seen the destructive ways that the longing for that can play out. And so I think all of us as educators are wanting to say, here's this amazing palette of tools where you can realize your own potential and that you can be seen and heard, and of course we want young people to be discovering their voice. And so I think the theater is one of the ways that can happen.
I love that, and appreciate too, you were talking about setting and how important that is, and the place of wonder could be at a library, cafeteria, could be in someone's under their bed as they're reading a story, but also in the theater, in one of your theaters as well, and all that it can provide for a student to think differently and connect differently, perhaps. And I think about, too, you've done some advocacy work on behalf of the arts nationally, I believe, in Washington, D.C., and tell us why that is so important to you to do.
Well, in part because, and of course this is my bias, but we need the arts as a civilization. It's what makes us a civilization, and not, I think the thing that makes us a community of civilized people and not just cohabitants is the fact that we transmit our values, our ideas, our feelings, our connections via artistic expression, by dialogue in various forms. And but the interesting thing is, so while we need it, we don't always want it. And so I think those of us who are artists, those of us who are in arts education, are always going to have to be advocates for why it's important. Because I wish we always had an appetite for the stuff that's good for us, but we don't. And you put yourself in this precarious situation where you can, it can feel a little pretentious to sort of say, I know what's good for you, and what you need is, but I think when you're an educator and when you're an artist and when you have something on offer, really it's just sort of saying, there's this beautiful thing that can enhance your life, that can build us up as individuals and as a community, and we need to remember it. Because the funny thing is, I always say to people, your experience today going to the theater is better than your best memory of it. because there's something also about live performance. Don't you always leave a play and say, I knew I was going to like it, but it was so much better to be here. And actually something shook or changed in me that I didn't even think I was going to make available today. You know, I was coming in from work and I was just going to see this story. And then something wonderful occurred. And so we have to do a little persuasion to get people into the room where it happens. And so it's always going to be a shared job of not only making the work, but advocating for it as well. But the bottom line to me, though, is the excellence of the art is always the best advocate. So my first job is to make great theater. That's it. It's its own best advocate.
Well, I would argue back that you're a really great advocate for that too. So it's a tie. No, but what you articulated as to why the reason for advocating it makes such good sense. And I also want to just say thank you for doing that on behalf of children and youth and even adults in our community. You talk about society and who we are as people. I mean, truly, it really does make an impact, and I want to thank you for that. Truly. When you look back over your years at PCPA, are there any special highlights, one or two? I'm sure there's a million, but one or two special ones?
Oh, of course, you know, and one leaps to mind. I'll say that one, and
Okay.
there are 10,000
Sure.
others. We produced a world premiere of a play by Jose Cruz Gonzalez called The Heart's Desire, and it happened to be a story about a Mexican-American World War II veteran and returning to his hometown after the war, and the struggle for acknowledgement as a full citizen for so many who have gone and served our nation and then come back and been marginalized as citizens. And to tell that story in a very personal way, as part of that production, we did some outreach to some of our local veterans groups, to the American GI Forum, and there was a night when we had a big group of Hispanic Latino vets who came to the show with their families. Wonderful. And then we did a talk back with the cast and with the playwright afterwards. And I remember after that night and hearing some of those veterans who just enjoyed seeing their story and feeling validated and represented and celebrated. And saying, you know, on behalf of my family, thank you for telling this story, for having that be among the things that's getting to the stage here in Santa Maria. Right. And I remember standing outside with some of my colleagues and saying, this is the feeling that I want to have all the time, doing a new work of art that really resonates with our community and has people feeling like they are seen, heard, honored, celebrated. You know, and then I think for others in the community who said, I didn't know this story. That's not something that has occurred to me before. You know, those are really special moments, and you know, and happily, that's one of thousands. You know, and so that's the kind of thing that keeps you going back to work, because a lot of it is just plain hard work. You know, right. But there's lots of, you know, really fantastic.
Well, thank you for sharing that special moment with all of us. And I have to tell you, it's just an honor and privilege. I think this is truly a special moment for me to be able to share your story with the audience here in the community. You impact so many through your leadership and your thoughtfulness, and your story about belonging, I think, is something that probably rings through in so many things with what you do and why you do it and how. So thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Schools of Thought.